The American dollar is backed by the lead standard. Now, what does that mean in a nutshell? All right, so the dollar used to be backed by gold. All right, so that means that you can exchange a dollar for a certain amount of gold, right? Or silver, right? It was a precious metal. There was an equivalent exchange, right? And so that put a limitation on how much money could be in circulation, which kind of puts a limit on how much wealth anyone could acquire. Obviously, you had the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all that fun. I mean, they were out in England, but still, metallic backed currencies and all that fun definitely had their flaws. But, so America spent a bunch of money overseas, and these other countries are in the 60s. We're like, so we can trade the dollars for gold, right? Because that's what it represents. America's like, yeah. But America didn't have enough gold, right? So Kissinger comes up with a great idea. I'm sure there's plenty of other people involved, but him and Nixon definitely get the credit, right, of setting up the petrodollar. So we're going to take the dollar off of gold. Instead, it's going to be backed by petroleum, right? And we're going to make a deal with Saudi Arabia, a relatively new nation, mind you, controlled by a single family, right? It's a kingdom. So make a deal with them, monopolize oil and all this other fun, right? And that's kind of the driving force for nations, right? You need petroleum. Now, the only way that you can buy it is with the American dollar. So that is what's been propping up our currency. All right, and now somebody gets a little too uppity, like Saddam Hussein. He wants to start selling petroleum on a gold standard. The United States can't have that, right? So war ensues, thus the lead standard, right? It's basically, this is what we're doing, or else, you know? And of course, it's way cheaper to send intelligence agencies in, right? You got the CIA. You just send in a CIA agent with a few $1 million and he can cause a lot of havoc, right? Fund these people over here, do this thing over there, get some dissidents, right? So, like, you can mess up an entire nation through what type of business you're willing to do with them, right? So you can basically just extort these nations that depend on you for their work, right? And so America has just been this all-consuming nation, right? While its currency is just inflated beyond, like, it's insane. It's hardly comparable to what it was, right? So America has enforced all of this. Like, America's been at war for the majority of its existence. Let's not get it twisted, right? And that's a whole nother thing. Okay, now war, it feeds into robbing the people. Okay, so World War I, World War II, the American people funded the war directly, right? So they bailed out the government. When the government didn't have enough, they bought war bonds, right? They contributed to the war effort, right? But after FDR and World War II, there was a lot more taxes, and now the government bails out companies and pays out to the people, right? So you see, when there's a catastrophe like this whole COVID thing, the government pays people. 100 years ago, the people would bail out the government, right? That's a big fucking deal, real big deal. And it's something everybody needs to kind of get through their heads. How the power has shifted so radically, right? It's a big deal. And now, you know, we try and have patriotism, and I love America. But America has done some nasty things, and the only way that it exists right now, as is because of slave labor, right? Like, it can't even be said any other way, right? The majority of our stuff is made in China. China has no human rights. They do not, right? So we can have our phones and all of our stuff made by people in factories with suicide nets, right? It's a joke that Nike shoes are made by little kids, right? That's funny, haha, you know. So we want to act all high and mighty, like we're better than whoever, right? And it's like, and act like we're against war as a population when we reap the benefits of it every day that we're alive. And we somehow think that it's distant from us. And then we wonder why other countries hate us, you know? Like, you create terrorists when you kill a little kid's dad or brother or mom or whoever. That fills that little kid's heart full of hatred. Women, boys, girls, whatever. You create enemies when you go to war, right? We should be allowing nations that are impoverished to share in prosperity and have fair trade deals with them. At the same time, we have to, as a population, start producing value. Because right now we are a nation of middlemen and shopkeepers, right? Because you have individuals that buy things from nations that extort their own people and then distribute it here to other vendors who distribute it to us. So it's like these people made money, these people made money, these people made money. We're paying for an expensive thing. These people are getting paid like garbage. And these guys make money and they make money and they make money. And then every time it transacts, there's taxes paid on it. There's this. That's like, or even if it's just one company doing it. You know what I mean? The fruit was grown in Argentina and then it was sent to China for packaging. And then it was sent to California and then it was loaded onto a truck and then it was driven down to Texas, right? So it's like, yo, there's got to be a better way to do that, you know? Like, it's insanity. But it's, you can't have a nation that doesn't abide by human rights involved in free trade, right? Because obviously they will monopolize everything while extorting their own people. And that's been allowed by every other nation who's benefited from that. That's pretty fucked up. But then we want to act about high and righteous for slavery 200 some years ago. We can protest that, videotape it on our iPhones. You know, now we're starting to see the axis tip because of our laziness and because of the way that we've bossed everybody around. And so now China's on the rise and we're on the decline, right? In some ways, they're kind of a paper dragon or whatever because they're not battle tested, really. And the United States has spent vast amounts of wealth, and if even a third of that got to the military, right? Because that's how they steal from you, take all the money through taxation, through this, through that, all sorts of penalties, right? Because you have the war on drugs is just a war on people, right? And now we have all of this where they come through and shut down everybody's businesses and impoverish everybody, tell them they can't work, and then have to jump through all these hoops, jump through hoops for everything, all the time. You got to pay income tax, you got to pay property tax, you got to pay sales tax, and that just scratches the surface. You save up all that money that you already paid taxes for, right? Or that house that you've been paying property tax on the whole time. And then you die and you give that to your kid. You try and take that too. But like money's been printed to infinity. And so when that happens, they give it out to the underlings. It's you and me and all them, right? And then that just funnels to the people that control and sell us everything, right? So they just amass more and more wealth to the point where it's absurd, right? And that's kind of where we're at now. And they can trade this fictional currency that's just been printed to infinity that we're all like, oh, we need this, right? They can trade that for actual resources. They can trade that for your time. So they can trade for anything that they want, right? And that is real, right? That is a big deal. We're kind of don't know how to break out of that. That's kind of the issue, right? Most people don't even understand the complexities of how it all works, right? Most people don't have the ability to kind of explain it with simplicity, or the people just don't lack overall interest in it altogether. Well, so it's always been. Yep. I don't know. People, what you gonna do? But there's obviously some issues, right? Because you have banks that create the majority of the money through lending, fractional reserve, right? So they can lend out 90 times, 9 times what they got in there. That's fun. And then the entire nation just borrows money from the Fed, which is great. Lead currency, backed by lead, the American dollar. Because if you don't buy petroleum with it, you'll wish you had. And that's kind of been the basis. But a lot of nations are kind of waking up to the fact that, hey, you kind of just keep on printing. So everybody knows that it's a sham and everything just keeps on turning, right? Eh, what are you going to do? Most of it all exists in offshore Cayman Islands, right? Because that's a whole nother thing, right? The way that they set up offshore accounts and they hide everything, and then we're the ones that are paying it. But like, you got to realize you can take $100 billion from Jeff Bezos and $100 billion from Elon Musk, but they'd have to sell their stock, and then their stock wouldn't be worth as much, and all this other stuff that would cause their companies to collapse, and all this other fun, right? Because they don't have just $100 billion laying around; it's all invested into their company. The shares, the portion of their company that they own, is where their wealth is. So that's their worth. That's not their liquid, right? Liquid is cash on hand, right? It's like you got to understand that principle. I hope so. I feel like a lot of people don't, and that's kind of why we have this issue. Well, if he just got $100 billion, it's like, yeah, but there's 300 some million people in the United States. So like, you charge all of them $1,000 a year, right? If not way more. Everybody that's working, say they pay 5 grand. Just say it's 150 million people that work. Come on. Or you can take 200 billion from these guys, crash their companies, and all this other fun. But they're paying politicians for this stuff anyway. I don't know about Musk, but all right, went off on a whole bunch of rabbit trails and stuff like that. But I don't know, kind of try and search out and understand the systems that we live in. Like, if you don't understand them, you can't see like what a farce it is, right? We need a little bit more common sense throughout society, right? Because the structures that support our existence seem to be increasingly fragile. the economic system just being one example. It is not a system that we can continue with in the long run. Let's keep that in mind. All right, we got more in common with each other than those that want us to fight.